Okay, so I've talked about the equipment, the preparation, and the filming of a wedding event. In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about what you should do with that footage once it's actually been collected. And one of the things that you really have to ask yourself when it comes to preparing for this video and when it comes to discussing it with the bride and the groom is, what do you want this video to actually be? What do you want this video to actually represent for the day? Because each wedding is different, and each wedding is going to require a different wedding video. This is one of the reasons why wedding videos are actually so difficult to do, and why I warranted putting this section into its own part, because there's going to be a lot to think about in here in this section alone, because this is where everything comes together. Recording the footage and preparing the equipment, it's a very mechanical procedure. There are sort of good things to do, bad things to do. You can plan for that, and you can act on that accordingly. When it comes to actually putting the video together, editing it, and working out what you want your video to actually show for the day, this is a whole different beast, and this is why wedding videos are particularly difficult. And this is one of the reasons why I've been inspired to make these two videos, is because when I do a video, I search on YouTube to try and find examples of wedding videos and tips and tricks to point out. And I got to admit, I'm generally disappointed. When I see wedding videos that come up on YouTube, they are not particularly impressive. They're usually done by people that sort of like to over stylize the video, and I think that's a real problem, that they look almost more like music videos than wedding videos. Often that they can actually be shortened down to as little as 3 or 4 minutes, with loads of stuff cut out, and the whole event just boom, 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 boom. Looks very nice, looks very stylized, looks very posh. Isn't really a representation of the day. What you want to do is you want to have effectively memories in video form. You want people to be able to watch back the video maybe 10, 20 years from now, and be able to remember that day as as vividly as possible. That's what your video, at least that's what I aim to do with the videos. Is to me, I'm capturing memories, not trying to make some stylized, sexy video with all nice, trendy music and all of that nonsense. No, you want it to be. It's not going to be the sharpest, coolest thing that you've ever produced. It's going to be something which is respectful to one of the most important occasions in a couple's life. So that you don't want to put pop trendy music and modern styled fonts. You want traditional. You want in the same style as the wedding. Now, like I say, different weddings are different. Have whole different styles. They're each a beast unto their own. So this is where I almost can't explain how to approach it, because each wedding it needs to be approached differently. The wedding that I did a week ago, which was for a family member, that was actually kind of it was very chilled out, laid back. There weren't that many people there. People kind of knew each other. People got on. It was traditional and it was formal, but it wasn't too uptight. So it was nice. It was easy to work for. You had a lot of you kind of had a lot of leeway, and it wasn't. Yeah, I mean, it was just as is. But I've also done weddings before which are very uptight and very formal, and you don't really want to start chopping and changing and adding in funky transitions and fancy zoom shots and all that kind of stuff, and have sort of background music and musical transitions or anything like that. Some weddings I've done have just been really, really formal, and you want it with the very stylized font and the very slow, methodical pace. And the wedding video itself came out to about, the one I'm thinking of right now, half an hour long. You might think that that's ridiculously long for a wedding, for a video. But again, the people that are going to be watching, and also it's knowing your audience. Your audience isn't mass. This video isn't going to be for mass appeal. It's not going to be for mass consumption. It's going to be for people to. It's going to be for the same people that are going to be looking over those photos in a photo book years from now. It's going to be for family members and close friends and people that couldn't make it. And that's why you want an accurate representation. So I generally, when it comes to the ceremony, I have a particular strategy which I'm going to share with you now. And it took me, again, a while to work this out. So is to do several versions. Now, this might sound like a significant amount of work, but there's an easier way of doing it. first of all, again, what you're going to want to work out is, are the best man speeches, are the groom's speeches, and are the bride's father's speeches, and are anyone else's speeches going to be included, the dinner speeches, are they going to be included in the main brunt of the wedding video, the main section of the wedding video? Are you going to have just one long wedding video that covers everything? Because on occasions I've managed to do that, and on some occasions it just seemed more logical to break it down into two halves, where you've got the ceremony itself and then everything that's not the ceremony afterwards, because the ceremony itself being a certain tone, being of a certain pace, and then the speeches being particularly informal, having those two things as part of the same video sometimes doesn't necessarily work. Just having them as two separate videos, and if you're burning them to a DVD, two separate chapters on the DVD, so it's not really that big of a split, tends to be quite, all right. In the particularly formal one that I'm thinking of, that I did a couple of years ago, it was actually the best man speeches were very, very formal in of themselves as well. There weren't too many jokes, and none of them were anywhere near blue. So it made a lot of sense to actually include the best man and the groom's father's speeches and all that kind of stuff in with the ceremony itself. It had that same tone, it had the same pace. There wasn't a shift in pace. So yeah, you want to work out whether or not, and there is no right answer to that. To whether or not you should include it all in one video or not. Again, this is something, you might want to discuss it with the bride and groom. What you will often find that you end up doing is having to edit this video and put this video together on your own. Like, you're on your own in a lot of cases, because the bride and groom will be off on their honeymoon, and it generally is quite nice, and that gives you plenty of time to edit, but it's generally quite nice if they have something to come back to. So yeah, there's whereas you've got to, you can have a good week or even longer while they're on the honeymoon. You obviously you can't necessarily contact them. Maybe they might be in a different country, or they might not want to be contacted. Certainly not to do with bloody wedding planning stuff, because probably one of the best feelings on the honeymoon is knowing that they haven't got to do any more wedding planning stuff. So you are on your own when it comes to editing the wedding video, at least getting like a full proper draft together by the time they come back. So like I say, you have to make out whether or not the structure of it, and whether or not you want to mix the informal parts with the formal parts. What you want to do, and you want to do this should actually really be in the preparation, but the wedding, the songs that they play. Now, there are usually 3 songs in a wedding. You have the song that the bride walks into. You have the song that they're signing the register, they're signing the register to, and the song that they're walking out to. Now, sometimes there are other songs, outside of that, but those are the 3 that you want to actually know what they are, because then what you can do is you can actually pick up those songs, and then you can actually put them into the video as the songs. What you don't really want to do is have to rely on your audio recorder or your camera to actually pick up the songs and then use that sound, that audio recording, as the wedding ceremony. So when the bride's walking in, or when the bride, usually when the footage starts, it will start with the groom already at the altar. That's generally how it begins. I've never had a wedding video where you film the groom coming into the ceremony. The groom's usually there from the beginning, because usually when it comes to wedding ceremonies, they're there like 20 minutes before the event anyway, just to make sure nothing's gone wrong or whatever. And like I say, that's not a bad time to ask them whether or not they might or might not be comfortable wearing a lavalier mic. Again, just measure the situation, right? Just use your common sense. Don't be up in everyone's faces. That's very important, because everyone's got stuff to worry about on that day. So, like I say, only do it if everything's going swimmingly. But like I say, when it comes to you're starting the video with the groom already arrived, and then if you can get the footage of the bride arriving, that works particularly well. Now, when the bride's coming down the aisle, when it comes to editing, what I generally want to do is to have about 10% of the volume being the crowd, the people, the clutter, the stamping of feet, the people getting up their chairs, all that kind of stuff. And then I want about 90% of the sound being the walking into music. Not the music that's actually being played, the actual music that you've actually picked up from somewhere else and then put it on in post-production for a much cleaner audio sound. Because what's worth bearing in mind, like I say, is you don't want to over-stylize wedding videos, because then it starts it starts distorting what you're trying to do with it. But in people's memories, they're going to remember that song, and particularly the bride and groom's memories, because they're again, that's who you're essentially making the video for. They are going to remember that song significantly more vividly than what the actual audio is actually being picked up. So what you want to do is that's, again, it's playing to a memory trigger, as it were. So if you're using, what I like to do is I have a bit of a montage of the whole setup type scene going on. Nothing too much. Maybe some shots of the bride getting out of the car. Maybe some shots of people setting up flowers. Maybe some shots of the groom just shifting from one foot to the other and so forth. And then have a bit of a 30 second to a minute montage. Not a fast montage, just a slow paced montage, setting up, as it were. Maybe you might want a shot of the venue from the outside, all that kind of stuff. And that, with the music of the walking in music playing, as in the stuff that you actually picked up from somewhere else, and then put that on, and then that track can then fade out as the bride has finished walking down the aisle after the bridesmaids after the bride's wedding party has come out. So the ceremony begins just as the walking in music is fading out that you've put on top of that. Again, measure up the audio balances accordingly. You don't want it to be just music, because you want a little bit of ambient sound, but you don't want so much ambient sound that it's distracting or clunky or whatever. Like I say, it's always worth having a feel for this, because again, it's a matter of weighing up the pace and weighing up the style. The music that they've chosen, which you will of course overlay, is going to be a good measure of that. So, depending on what song they've picked, maybe they might pick some traditional Celtic music, or they might pick something that could be popular when they were growing up, a piece of pop music or rock music that might be close to their heart. I've seen people walk onto that. So whatever the music is a good way of setting the tone anyway. Now, when it comes to filming the B-roll footage, don't worry about picking it up on the audio recorder as well. I'm actually doing a lot of filming in this section as well. And don't worry about too much about filming it with the audio recorder. You only need the audio recorder really for the ceremony and the speeches, the extended periods of time, because a lot of the B-roll stuff is just going to be ambient sounds anyway, which camera mics just are good enough at picking up anyway, and you don't need to worry about having to match up which audio goes with which file. So yeah, don't worry about too much on that. One thing as well that I've noticed a lot of wedding videos do, but I think looks particularly cheesy and something which I really would avoid at all costs, is when the bride and groom kiss at the end of the ceremony, a lot of people put that into slow motion. Terrible idea. It looks to me it looks straight out of a 90s sitcom, something that I wouldn't dream of doing, and it looks, again, it's something that is probably best just done in real time, as is. But that is a good moment to fade in the walking out music. So what you can do then is you can fade in the walking out music to the final kiss, and then and then as the bride and groom are walking together, and however that sort of sets up, you can actually just sort of you can fade from the kiss into the bride and groom getting ready to walk back down the aisle and out of the ceremony. And that would be where I'd end the ceremony section of the video, which seems to be sort of quite fitting as well. Okay, so when it comes to the groom, best man and bride's father's speeches, and anyone else who happens to be giving a speech, that's going to be perhaps one of the more difficult things that you're going to have to do as a cameraman, because different weddings often have them at different times. Or usually the three speeches are together, but they're not necessarily directly after the ceremony. They're usually after the meal that's after the ceremony, and that can be a little bit difficult to actually gauge when that might necessarily be. So you need to actually make sure that your cameras are set up ready to go pretty much whenever, and that includes, of course, your audio recorder. Now, you're not going to be able to lavalier anyone up for this one, so you're going to have to deal with doing the audio shotgun. But it's not usually too much of a problem. Now, this is one of the reasons why I often consider putting the speeches as a separate video, because again, it's more difficult to film, and it's certainly more difficult to film with multiple cameras. Now, if you've got plenty of warning, you've got plenty of time, you've got plenty of you've got the ability to set up and everything, then again you can do it from two cameras, and you can switch from camera A to camera B, depending on maybe who's speaking, or just to sort of keep it visually interesting. But it's not too bad if you just have the one camera focusing on each of the individual people when they're speaking, or even just filming it wide and have the full table, so that you can gauge sort of other people at the table's reaction, other people at the table listening in, and so forth. and then just sort of working from that. Again, it's probably one of the more difficult things to put into the wedding video. Sometimes it's best just to have all of the speeches there uncut. I've done that before, and it actually works quite well. What's worth bearing in mind, of course, is that if you've got like a nice rounded off ceremony that you're going to have either as a section of the video or as one video, and then you're going to do the speeches separately, then it's also worth bearing in mind who's actually going to be watching the speeches, the best man's speeches, the bride's father's speeches, etc. Because again, it is most likely going to be people that were either at the wedding or close friends and family of of the happy couple. So again, you might not necessarily have to over-stylize this, and you certainly really won't want to cut bits out. It's supposed to be that jovial moment where like two families are coming together, and the little bits of people doing speeches slightly awkwardly because they're not used to public speaking, all of that stuff. Sometimes it's kind of cute to keep that kind of stuff in. And again, this is part of the whole day where, again, you don't want to sort of over stylize something, because the sort of the emotional side of things and the memories that you want to capture everything. You don't want to put rose tinted glasses on it too much, because that's not how people are going to remember it. People are going to remember the cute little flaws and where people forget their lines, or when people have misplaced a page of their speech or whatever. So I wouldn't worry too much about that kind of thing. It's a bit of a difficult beast to manage, the speeches in and of themselves, because they vary probably the most from all the different weddings that I've been to. And again, if you're at a particularly formal wedding that has particularly formal speeches from the groom and the best man and the bride's father, then you can put it together with the ceremony, and it can kind of work. But in a lot of cases where you've got the best man making perhaps some off-color humor about the groom and so forth, it might be a good idea just to keep them as separate chapters on the DVD or separate files on when you finalize them. So it's worth just bearing that in mind as well. And again, the final dance, where that final dance goes, you can either put it at the end of the speeches, or you can even actually put it at the end of the ceremony as well. Again, there's not necessarily a right or a wrong answer to this. It depends on the tone of the event, but you've got to listen to the tone of the event. One size will not fit all when it comes to wedding videos. Some weddings, of course, will be more formal than others. So that's about it for when it comes to the actual stylizing of the event itself. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the software that I use now. So when I'm using Windows, I will often find myself using Magix movie editor. And it doesn't cost too much, actually. It's reasonably inexpensive, but because of the nature of the work that I do, it covers all the bases that I need it to cover. I don't need the Adobe Premiere whatever packages that cost £700-800, because a lot of what I do is simple, recordings or whatever. I don't need fancy effects. I don't need fancy transitions or After Effects or anything of that stuff. I generally just need something that I can cut things together with reasonably efficiently. The vast majority of video work that you'll ever end up doing will be stuff that doesn't need all the fancy doesn't need the fancy high-end stuff. So that being said, I think Magix is a good middle ground. It allows you to do green screen effects. It allows you to adjust the images really quite well, and it's not too expensive. I think it's about $100, or at least in that price range, and you can actually pick it up from Steam, which is particularly good. So yeah, when it comes to value for money, I think Magix is like the nice middle ground. You might even call it prosumer. So it's not super professional and stuff, but it's certainly a few steps ahead of amateur hour. So yeah, that's definitely Magix is what I go for, because it doesn't throw in a whole bunch of tools that you're never going to use that just sort of clutter up your interface, and it's got a lot of auto things as well, auto adjusts, and the white balance is good on it. You're really just looking for things where you can adjust the white balance. You can you've got good encoding options. You can splice and transition stuff accordingly. You can do overlaid titles, things like that. Magix works really quite well. On Steam, it's worth getting, because that way it's like it's a proper repository of software. I would actually stay away from Cyberlink Power Director. It's actually got a lot of good reviews, but I used it, and I got to say it's lacking in a lot of features. It is reasonably cheap, but then it's in a situation of you get what you pay for. And also, one of the big problems with Cyberlink Power Director is that you can only download it the once from their website. If you need to re-download it, you need to buy the software again. I don't know what kind of policy that is, because it's clearly, obviously, not a very good one. But it put me off from buying it. It actually pushed me on to trying Magix for the first time. And Magix is, again, it's one of those bargains where it does more like, again, you get what you pay for. So it's about $100. I think in the UK it's about £80. So there's a bit of a discrepancy in price there, I've got to be honest. But it does the job in the overwhelming majority of cases for Windows as well. And it's pretty good software for what it does. You don't need, like I say, I do a lot of professional camera work, and it's all I've ever needed. If I needed Adobe Premiere, then I would upgrade to Adobe Premiere in the blink of an eye. I mean, it's a tax dip, so it wouldn't hurt me one way or the other. But Magix is a nice, it's simple, and it does what you want it to do, and it's kind of it's all right. You can burn stuff to CDs with it, I believe, and you can also. Like I said, the auto effects are quite good on it. The title overlays are quite good. You can do green screens and stuff on it. So it works it works well enough. There's a lot of auto titles and things like that you can use. It's one that I would recommend if you've got the money to spare on it. Obviously, you can go with things like Sony Vegas Pro. I've had Sony Vegas Pro. That's pretty damn good. I've not actually tried Adobe Premiere or any of the Adobe suite. I don't tend to like Adobe as a company. I don't find their software particularly well put together personally, but I know a lot of people in the business do tend to go for it anyway. So personally, I would go if you can afford it and you're willing to learn it. Sony Vegas Pro is pretty good. Magix is good, again, if you can afford it. Stay away from Cyberlink Power Director. That's the Windows side of things. When it comes to the Linux side of things, because as you guys know, I'm an avid Linux user, I've only ever found one piece of video editing software really worth my time, and that's Kdenlive. Spelt Kdenlive. I'm sure if you guys have done any video editing before, you'd have heard of it. To me, it's the only one. There's OpenShot and there's Pitavi, but those are essentially Windows Movie Maker for Linux. They're really not very good. I hear that they're actually trying to work on them and they're trying to make them more advanced suites, but really Kdenlive is the only thing that you can really go for on Linux at the moment. It's a bit of a shame that you don't actually have that much choice in it, at least to me. I know a lot of other people, some people get on quite well with Blender. Blender's a very advanced piece of software, and it often perhaps maybe is too advanced in a lot of ways. And I know that there's Cinelira, but that hasn't been upgraded in quite some time. So like I say, Kdenlive, again, it's good for it's effectively, it's got more features than Magix for Windows, but it's pretty good. It can do all the green screen stuff. I don't know why I'm talking about green screen when we're talking about wedding videos. You should never use green screen on a wedding video. It's just end of. But it's, to me, I suppose, a solid green screen option is like my benchmark for calling it prosumer, somewhere between consumer and somewhere between professional. So yeah, Kdenlive. I've done wedding videos on Kdenlive plenty of times, and it always comes through all right as well. So again, yeah, like I say, Magix, Magix for Windows, and Kdenlive for Linux. Those are my two recommendations. Now, when it comes to sound, to me, I found actually the Magix for Windows actually has some decent sound facilities on it, and I do know that Magix do have some sound editing suites that you might want to look into if you've got the money for them. But when it comes to actually making sure the sound just is crisp, is the levels are correct, and that people are people's voices are being heard, and maybe any background noises can actually be eliminated, and to get rid of any background hiss or anything like that. There is a program which is available for both Linux and Windows, and I'm pretty sure it's available for Mac as well, called Audacity, Audacity. Definitely worth Googling. If you do anything with sound, it's something that is pretty essential. It's an open source utility that you can use to edit and edit sound, basically. Edit and improve and enhance sound. You can take out background noises, you can adjust basses, trebles, you can add reverb, you can add sort of echoes if you needed echoes for one reason or another. You can actually have a go at reducing echoes, so if you're actually recording the wedding in a particularly big and echoey room, then it's then you can actually have a go at it. Then you can actually perhaps try and tackle that on Audacity as well. The compression is quite good. So if your microphone is set up so that it's picking one person up significantly stronger than maybe anyone else at the ceremony, then you can try and adjust for that in Audacity as well, so that you can actually correct the audio and make it actually sound a little more consistent, which is perfect. It gives you all the levels that you can see, and it's really the best thing to do in post. What's also useful as well when adjusting the levels is to make sure that you don't to adjust applauses as well when people are clapping. It's always worth making sure that the applauses actually sound quite nice. It can be more difficult because applauses, being as loud as they are, often max out and they often shoot off the scale, and it's worth trying to resample that in whatever way you can, or even sometimes it's worth actually getting a round of applause from somewhere else and then actually just sampling that over instead of the round of applause that you might have picked up with your audio recorder, so that to replace it so that it doesn't peak out effectively. And I've done this before and it actually sounds perfectly seamless. It's fantastic. Only do it with applauses though, because applause is just like a generic noise more than anything else. You can switch out applauses for cleaner sounding ones here and there, and that actually is a little bit of a tip that I've picked up, and it's perfectly it works perfectly well. Obviously you want to sort of choose the right sound to switch out and replace it with, but it is possible. Possibly you might even not necessarily be recording it with one that's been shot from somewhere else, but you might want to replace the if the round of applauses is peaking out on this, and actually with the auto settings there's a good chance that it won't, but if it is, camera 2, which might be at the back of the room, that might have caught the applause from an angle where it didn't peak out as much, so you can take the audio from camera 2 and then sample it onto the to the audio recorder's track, and that kind of works out quite well. So I've covered a lot in this video, and I hope it has been helpful to at least some of you out there. Obviously, and I should have probably said this at the beginning, it's going to require some degree of obviously prior knowledge as to how to put video editing together. If you have any thoughts, please let me know down in the description below, and if you have any tips and things that you've learned, actually, because some of the tips that I've actually given to you today were actually from the comment section of my videos, and that I've actually taken on board and used and actually found helpful. So thank you to you guys who have actually done that, who have actually helped me out there. So if you've got any more tips you'd like to share, please feel free to either share them in this video or the previous video. And thanks very much for watching. So that's about it for me today. Until next time, I've been Chris Ware, and you've been awesome. Take care now.